Hello, everyone. Welcome to the wonderful world of Sunday and also daylight savings. My system clock had not changed over correctly. My cell phone had. So I set the stream to start at 8 a.m. because that's what my system clock was saying the next nearest hour was, when it was actually 7 a.m. now because we've fallen back. So if I misled you as to when this began, I apologize. It was not my intention. But anyway, here we are. Rock us like a hurricane. Hello, everyone. Just thought I was awake. I was bored. Thought I'd read another essay on abolition from the Abolition for the People project. Why? Well, I like to stay informed and at least find out if maybe somebody can give me a better idea of what they mean when they talk about abolition of police, prisons, and so on. And holy cow, there are a lot of you here. I'm very appreciative of your attendance, given the circumstances. So hello, Brett, Corey Suzuki, Johnny Stoffel, Mark Bonicky, Chicago Mike, Rick Ashbringer, Ali, Jeanette E. Hellis, Havoc Vladimirovich Stalinov, Fernanda, the Magister, Raziel, Havoc Vladimirovich Stalinov. I said again. Why did I say it a second time? Because sweeter for the second dose? I don't know. Non-Vitae Rex, formerly Rodline. Maybe my brain's still waking up. That's probably true. All right, well, let's get into this. Which one is this? Well, of the 2 or 3 articles I am allowed to read of this a month, we're going to look at Dismantle, Change, Build. Dismantle, Change, Build. What does that mean? I don't know. Let's find out. And this is by Dan Berger. Don't know who that is. What is and what could be the policies of abolition? From state-level coalitions to sweeping federal mandates, imagining the future means spending money in the right places. Aha. All right. Oh, this is by Dan Berger and David Stein. Oh, okay. I don't know why it said... It's posted by Dan Berger, written by 2 guys. All right. The far-reaching vision of abolition. Far-reaching. I think maybe the better phrase would be abstract and undefined, but that's just me. The far-reaching vision of abolition is enacted daily in political struggles over spending priorities, a key measure of whose lives matter and how. Abolitionists have picked up the torch of 20th century black labor radicals and other racial and economic justice organizers who have insisted that public budgets have moral implications. All right. The call to defund the police is a deeply rooted strategy that to some entered the 2020 landscape as if from nowhere. It's true to some, but those of us who have been following Black Lives Matter for a couple of years now know that that is not a new idea. It's just gained new prominence. Yet the demand has been shaped by more than 3 decades of organizing against police and prisons. Excuse me. It has been molded by what historian Barbara Ransby has described as movements filled with leaders. You know, sorry for another aside. I'm just thinking of another attempted movement filled with nothing but leaders. If you guys recall the Agents of Change TED Excellence we did, or I did with Kurt Metzger. No, wait, I didn't do... Sorry, that's not the one I did with Kurt Metzger. That's the one that he saw and got all excited about. Anyway, there too was a proposal to have a movement with nothing but leaders. But here's the problem. You can't have a movement with nothing but leaders. You have to have a leader, or else it doesn't go anywhere, because everybody thinks they're in charge. That's just what that brought to mind. I apologize. From activists like James Yaki Sales in the 1980s to Ransby's own work building the Black Radical Congress in the 1990s, to that of Eddie Ellis and the New York-based Prison Moratorium Project in the 1990s and 2000s. I've never heard of any of those, but that's just me. To the ascent of the broader movement for Black Lives and both the ephemeral and durable formations that have sprung up over the past 6 years since the Ferguson protests gripped the world's attention. Protests, you say? Yes, that's what people remember most about Ferguson and the protests. Thank you. This is Kyle. Hello, chat people and scribbles. We're up this early for you, Scribe, and also for work. Well, I I'm sorry that you have to work on a Sunday morning. I wish you were able to relax and sleep, but needs as needs be, and I'll be up just as early tomorrow doing my work, so thank you, Kyle. The call to defund is best understood as an effort to revoke the political and economic power of police and of the larger criminal legal system it upholds. Criminal legal system. Indeed, before the protests against the murders of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor popularized the demand to defund the police, abolitionists around the country initiated campaigns for clemency and to decarcerate jails, prisons, and detention centers. How do you decarcerate a jail or a prison? They are inherently carceral institutions. I don't know what that means. These campaigns could be found in prison, too. Incarcerated people have staged dozens of rebellions against institutional medical neglect in the face of a deadly pandemic, building on 10 years of labor and hunger strikes inside U.S. prisons. I think if prisoners stage a rebellion in the prison, that's called a prison riot. I could be mistaken, but that doesn't sound very productive. While Republicans and Democrats may use different talking points, state spending demonstrates their shared commitment to preserving racist social control through police and prisons. Whether speaking the language of authoritarianism or professionalism, both Donald Trump and Joe Biden responded to the summer of 2020 uprisings. Uprisings, you say. Uprisings. By pledging additional funding and support to police. Yes, because uprisings in your vernacular are what the rest of us called rioting and looting and chaos. Because for every peaceful protest, there was one giant riot that took place the night after or the day of. So don't know what to tell you. Or I'll correct myself. There were probably a lot more peaceful protests. Unfortunately, the riots and the looting and the arson and the destruction have a far longer memory for the rest of us than people peacefully marching. And that is a detriment to legitimate peaceful protest. I'm not going to deny. That's a slap in the face to people who honestly and peacefully attempted to speak their opinions and express themselves. But that doesn't change the fact that these situations have unleashed just an absolute cavalcade of destruction under the name of justice and or protest. So yeah, a lot of things have been unfairly, hijacked by people who don't care about peaceful protest, but it's still happening, and it's happening a lot, and it's happening right now. So sorry, law and order is going to supersede whatever the original intent of these quote unquote protests were, because they've all in one way, shape, or form turned into something destructive or portend something destructive when a protest is announced. That's just reality. Sorry. Thank you, Bear Koch, for the donation. No comment. Appreciate it. Sorry, guys. I keep trailing off, but that's just where my mind goes. That is why abolitionist campaigns to defund the police and decarcerate prisons are so transformative. By their very nature, they'd be transformative. They approach local and national budgets with necessary urgency as a venue in which the status quo can be either reinforced or remade. Word salad. It is both a defensive posture and a visionary one. It is both big and small. It is both wide and thin. It's a three-pronged strategy that the abolitionist organization Critical Resistance has summarized as dismantle, change, and build. That sounds a lot like the Iraq war strategy of secure, hold, and build, I think it was. Wasn't that the strategy, the three-pronged strategy? It sounded like it was something, but it was just three buzzwords. Okay. Abolitionists have long operated at this intersection of opposing what is and fighting for what could be. Beginning in the 1970s, several national organizations tried to stop the growing punishment regime evident in new laws and new prisons. After Black Marxist scholar and abolitionist Angela Davis was acquitted of federal charges in 1972, her defense committee transformed into a broader effort to stem the tide of criminalization. Okay. Among its priorities, the National Alliance Against Racist and Political Repression, NAARPR, which I've never heard of before, honestly, protested, quote, repressive legislation, unquote, and, quote, police crimes, unquote, both of which were abetted by massive funding grants enabled through the Law Enforcement Assistance Administration and the Nixon administration's open hostility to communities of color and the left. The NAARPR was one of several national coalitions to contest this increasingly repressive turn under the Nixon administration. The Nixon administration, okay. The National Moratorium on Prison Construction, NMPC, which I've also never heard of before, gathered faith-based and secular progressives to challenge the federal government's plan to construct additional prisons in the 1970s. One of the most colorful efforts in this era, the Stop the Olympic Prison campaign, or STOP, worked to block turning the 1980 Olympic Village living quarters for athletes into a prison. The U.S. Olympic Committee sued STOP for its poster, which featured the Olympic rings locked in a cage. A judge sided with NMPC on First Amendment grounds, though the prison was ultimately built. Okay, so all of these organizations and coalitions attempted to do things and they all failed. Sounds like. Or at least you're not telling us of any successes. Okay. These and similar campaigns sought not only to stop new construction, but to support currently incarcerated people who continue to publish newspapers, form labor unions, support defense campaigns, and otherwise organize against their captivity. I'll bet you, and I'm just going to guess here, I'll bet you that their captivity was based on criminal behavior and not like they were just rounded up and thrown into cages, as seems to be the constant refrain and, might I say, conspiracy theory behind the phrase mass incarceration. I mean, people who are incarcerated don't stop being human, but they're not there for no reason. Most of the time, you have people who are in jail for crimes they did not commit. It's true. But those are the outliers. As much as we might want to think otherwise sometimes, those are the outliers. And while they could not stop the onslaught of repression that sacrificed millions of people to police and prisons, what, like human sacrifice? Like police and prisons are like deities or something? What? Groups like the Southern Coalition on Jails and Prisons and the Committee to End the Marion Lockdown, formed in the 1970s and 1980s, helped seed new abolitionist efforts in the 1990s and 2000s that began to have greater success. Okay, what successes? California is instructive. All right. From 1980 to 2000, the state witnessed a nearly 500% rise in its prison population, complete with a 2-decade prison building spree that saw 23 new prisons open. At its height, the California prison system held 160,000 people, well over half the entire country's prison population in 1970. To stem that tide, organizations and coalitions like Critical Resistance, California Prison Moratorium Project, California Coalition for Women Prisoners, Justice Now, Californians United for a Responsible Budget, and the Prison Activist Resource Center thwarted plans to open additional facilities in the state. How? I'm just curious, by what method? More recently, these and other organizations have stopped jail expansion and pressured the governor to grant several large-scale clemencies. Together, these and other organizations comprising Californians United for a Responsible Budget have helped to ensure that more than 140,000 new prison and jail beds were never built. What if people need a place to sleep while they're in prison? As a result of this organizing, including the emergency clemency campaigns in response to the pandemic, the state's prison population has dropped below 100,000 people for the first time in 30 years. Is that partially due to a lack of space, lack of beds, and therefore they have to let people go that they might not otherwise do so, simply because they can't handle the capacity, putting people back out on the street that might be criminals? How you achieved this goal is what I'm very curious about, and what that says about the process. I mean, if we're going under the assumption that anyone and everyone that is ever incarcerated is not supposed to be there in the first place, then I guess that would be a success. But I have several questions. The last 6 months of upheaval and crackdown prompts the question of the last half century and earlier. What type of protest movements could be built if communities were freed from the violence of policing and incarceration? The violence of policing and incarceration. What would happen if they were freed of the violence of crime? I guess we won't know if we get rid of police and prisons. Contests over budget priorities are about what the state can be and should be. All right. Many abolitionists root this work in W.E.B. Du Bois' classic analysis of abolition democracy, the political struggle led by formerly enslaved people in the wake of the Civil War to construct new institutions while also eradicating violent ones. Yes, incarceration is slavery, remember everyone. A similar fight is underway today, where currently and formerly incarcerated people and their allies work to change the world by abolishing the prison industrial complex. Scholar activist Ruth Wilson Gilmore has similarly stressed that, quote, abolition is a theory of change, it's a theory of social life, it's about making things, unquote. Abolition is not about making things. Abolition is about destroying something, or erasing something. By definition. So, okay, well, you've talked about getting rid of stuff. What do you put in its place? As with all these articles so far, I have waited with bated breath to hear what the alternative is. If you're going to take away police and you're going to take away prisons, what do you fill that void with? Because crime isn't going to go away. Abolition is and has always been a slate of affirmative demands for the world we need. The struggles to defund the police and decarcerate prisons are wholly intertwined with other efforts to transform society. Medicare for all, a job guarantee, and a homes guarantee are battles for a humane and ecologically just budget, as are efforts to release aging people in prison and close detention centers. The Green New Deal is, or could be, an abolitionist project. The Red New Deal certainly is. The Red New Deal? I have no idea what that is. There's a hyperlink. I will open it in another tab. You won't be able to see this, but the Red New Deal? What is the Red New Deal? The Green New Deal can connect every struggle to climate change. A Red New Deal can build on those connections, tying indigenous liberation to the fight to save the planet. Oh, red, as in skin color. Oh, that's progressive. Okay, going back to the first article. While many of those policy goals can only be fully achieved at the federal level, that spirit animates local and state battles, which is where most spending on police and prisons takes place. For example, while federal spending on prisons accounts for about 10% of all prison spending, only the federal government can thoroughly cushion against economic recessions and depressions. Okay. But with the jackboots of local police off the necks of activists across the country, movements against austerity will have greater chances to flourish. Combating inequality will still be an uphill climb, particularly as municipalities try to co-opt or dilute abolitionist demands. By reducing the number of police and prisons, by eliminating the state's capacity for repression, The defund struggles work to enlarge broader movement capacity. Abolitionists remain resolute on the larger goal of freedom. That entire paragraph said nothing. It advanced this discussion in no way, shape, or form. What are you going to do in the alternative? From the civil rights movement to Occupy Wall Street, criminalization has been a key tactic to undermine protest and roll back the welfare state. From the civil rights movement to Occupy Wall Street, criminalization has been a key tactic to undermine protest and roll back the welfare state. What? Neoliberal austerity was imposed via a police officer's pistol and the bars of prison cells. In response, abolitionists pursue what anthropologist Hannah Appel has called, quote, reparative public goods, unquote, like housing, education, and healthcare for all. Okay, housing, education, and healthcare for all are all fine goals. How does that replace police and prisons? Entering the realm of public policy, abolition rejects the political obstinacy. Sorry, my brain's waking up. And technocratic fixes that have seen every major cities actually increase their funding for police departments this year, and most states continue to use conviction status to deny voting rights to most currently and formerly incarcerated people. Holy cats. According to the Sentencing Project, 1 out of every 44 adults is disenfranchised by the carceral system, just one of many ways that policing and imprisonment constrain political participation. Again, if we're operating under the belief that people are in prison for no reason, or simply by giving away free homes, free health care, and education, crime will stop, and the only reason that there is crime is because those things are lacking, then maybe all this makes sense. But that's not how it works. Police and prisons uphold the world that is. Abolition fights for the world that should be. Abolition unites struggles across time and space. An adventure across space and time. Abolitionist causes like ending cash bail, decarcerating and closing prisons, feeding elderly and vulnerable incarcerated people, providing humanitarian aid to migrants, decriminalizing sex work, halting evictions, supporting incarcerated survivors of domestic violence, blocking deportations, expanding healthcare. These reforms have revolutionary implications, which is why they have been resisted so bitterly. Okay, let's back up a little bit. Ending cash bail. Okay, cash bail is a really sticky subject. How do you ensure that someone is going to show up for their trial? How do you make it difficult or require that a person put up something if they're going to be out while their trial's in process and so on, especially for major crimes and such? I don't know. And do you end cash bail? Does that mean, well, sir, you're charged with murder, come back on the 21st like we tell you to? Or you just lock them up and wait them and have them wait there? I mean, I don't have an answer to the cash bail thing. I think that in some instances, in a lot of instances, having to require someone to pay for their freedom while someone else can, it's the rich man's privilege at that point. So yeah, the cash bail system is goofy. There's probably a better way. I don't know what it is. That'd be a different subject. Decarcerating and closing prisons. Are there people being held there? What would you do with the people if you close the prison? They have to go somewhere because they've been convicted of crimes. Just reducing prisons doesn't reduce crime. I don't understand that part. So why is that being bitterly resisted? I can't imagine. I misspoke earlier. I said feeding the elderly. It says freeing the elderly. My mistake. Freeing elderly and vulnerable incarcerated people. Again, depends on the circumstances. Just drawing a line and saying once you hit 65, you're out of jail. It's a case-by-case basis because each individual is in prison for a different reason under different circumstances. You just can't make it just a wash like that. I'm sorry. So you're going to get resistance. Vulnerable incarcerated people, what does that mean? I don't know. Providing humanitarian aid to migrants. We don't provide humanitarian aid to migrants? I mean, even if you're in the country illegally, you still possess certain rights under law. Not the same rights as a citizen, but certain rights to due process. And we feed and house people who are not supposed to be here for the time that we're processing their either claims of asylum or so on. Okay. Decriminalizing sex work. I'm not against that, but of course it depends on what you're talking about. How do you regulate it, tax it, so on? I mean, there are plenty of good arguments for decriminalizing sex work or, making it legal and regulated and so on. I don't have a problem with the notion. It would depend on the specifics. So for myself, I'm not resisting that one bitterly. Halting evictions. Again, it depends on the situation. Just across the board, the people who own the places that people are living in shouldn't be penalized if someone's not paying their rent by continuing to house someone who's not paying their rent. Supporting incarcerated survivors of domestic violence. Well, why are they incarcerated? Maybe they are victims of domestic violence. That doesn't give them a free pass depending on what they're incarcerated for. I mean, blocking deportations. Why? Just because? Why? If people are in the country illegally, they're in the country illegally. They're not supposed to be here, so they get sent back to where they came from. If they want to get into the country legally, well, they can follow all the same rules as the people who come here legally. What does that do? I'm resisting that one, yes. Expanding healthcare. To who? For what? In what way? Okay. I'm not resisting the notion, but I don't know what you're talking about. All right. When united together, they form a comprehensive agenda. No, a comprehensive agenda of what? A comprehensive agenda of let's just throw up our hands and never penalize anybody for anything ever again. Let's destroy all prisons. Let everybody out who's over 50 in prison. Let everybody who comes into the country illegally just stay and then pay for their everything. No. That's not a comprehensive agenda. That sounds like chaos and madness. It is a platform to eliminate austerity and create what Ruth Wilson Gilmore and sociologist Paul Gilroy have discussed as a universal future for humanity. These practices are both the abolitionist horizon and its root. And that's the end of the article. By the scrolling bar, I thought there was a ton more of this, but no, that is the end of the article. So in replacement of police and prisons, we're going to end cash bail, which becomes an irrelevancy if you don't have prisons in the first place, because what would you be paying bail for? Decarcerating, closing prisons, freeing elderly and vulnerable incarcerated people, just willy-nilly, providing humanitarian aid to migrants. Of what sort, for what reason, what kind of migrants? What are you talking about? Decriminalizing sex work, to what extent? How do you police it? Because, a lot of people are in sex work not of their own volition, or they're being effectively trafficked. And what are you going to do about that part of it? Halting evictions, why? Supporting incarcerated survivors of domestic violence, how? Blocking deportations, why? Expanding healthcare, how? And this is a universal future for humanity. It sounds like a utopia, which will not and will never happen. I'm sorry. I don't know what to tell you. Nothing about this article told me about what it is you intend to do or what it is you intend to replace it with. What was the title of this thing again? Dismantle, change, build. Okay, you get rid of the prisons, you get rid of the police, and you change them into what? You didn't even tell us, what is the role of police in this new future? What is the role of prisons in this new future? Apparently none. So what goes in place of that? How do you manage crime? What do you do with Dylan Roof? What do you do with Ted Bundy? What do you do with the serial rapist? What do you do with the serial con artist? What happens to Bernie Madoff? I don't know what, I have no idea what this future looks like. Dismantle, change, and build. Build what? Build what in its place? Every single one of these articles has gone on and on and on about all the problems, all the things that are wrong in their view. And I'm like, okay, you know what? I'm willing to listen. You've spelled out your problems. You've spelled out what you think is going wrong. What is your solution? And if you don't have a solution, okay, if you don't have a solution, it's okay to say, I don't know. You can say, these things are unjust. These things are wrong. Da, 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 da. We should find a way to do da, 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 da. Okay. Do you have even like a reasonable abstract idea of how to do that? No. We should just get rid of prisons, get rid of police, and give everybody free houses, free healthcare, a free job, free income, forever, and no one ever has to go to prison again. Great. Sounds absolutely wonderful. How? Okay. Let's just say, for the sake of argument, free houses for everybody. Wow, that is a great goal. That is a great goal, right? If everybody got a free house, right? A free house, free land, I'm guessing free utilities for some period of time. Who cares about paying for it, right? Because nobody's going to have to actually pay. But anyway, everybody gets a free house. Okay, sure. Great goal. How do you get there? How do you pay for it? How do you manage that? Who builds it? Who pays the people that build it? Who pays the people that make the building materials to build these things? And on and on and on and on and on, all the way up the chain. And then once you've built these things, who maintains them? And who pays for that? How do you prevent any kind of abuse? I mean, who owns the land? Or if they're not paying rent, if it's just a free house, like, okay, do they not have to pay taxes on the house? If it's just a free house, if it's free and clear, what happens then? And on and on and on. Simple questions, right? I mean, I'm not an economist. I'm not a construction worker. I don't know anything about nothing, right? The closest I've ever gotten to building anything was probably SimCity. But I can at least, sort of think 3 steps beyond that and ask a question, because those questions keep building up. And not a single one of these articles has offered anything that sounds like a substantive answer. And that's disappointing. With as much passion as all of these authors apparently possess over what they see as wrong with the world. And I'm not going to say the world's perfect, not after this year. But if you're going to come to the table saying you have a problem and these things need to change, how? What? No reasonable... let me back up. I cannot take anyone seriously who comes to me and says, we need to abolish police and prisons, without giving me a very, very, very good explanation of what replaces those things. What happens to crime? What do you do with Dylan Roof? What do you do with Ted Bundy? What do you do with Bernie Madoff? Oh, those are extremes, Scribe. We'd have prisons for those kinds of people. Okay, well, what about the person that goes around breaking into houses all the time and stealing stuff? Right? I mean, not a violent criminal. Okay? Maybe never takes more than $1,000 worth of stuff out of somebody's house, but does it over and over and over again because they have no interest in getting a job and they just want to steal from people. What do you do with that person? Just let them go? Have some sort of community powwow where you tell them how mad they made everybody and they're supposed to learn from that? And they do it again? What happens then? Now multiply that kind of behavior by about, 20,000 people across a particular state or region. Then what do you do? Well, I don't know. Neither do they, apparently. So anyway, I read these things because I'm hoping maybe there'll be something in there that I can sink my teeth into a little bit. Every time so far, no. And again, there are dozens and dozens of these articles in this Abolition for the People project. I've only picked out a handful because I'm only allowed to. I'll do another one maybe next week. But anyway, that's the article and my commentary thereof. I'll go to the chat real quick if you guys have anything to say, and then I will wrap this up. Chris R. In an anarchist system, there is only mob justice, and the penalty for all crimes is death. In the absence of police and a criminal justice system and prisons and so on, I don't know what the alternative is except for these. And it wasn't mentioned in the article, but I'm thinking back to a video I did a couple of years ago now, where a lot of these ideas were promoted long before the George Floyd situation and all that by a Black Lives Matter leader that I did a video on, who said something to the effect of community-based justice teams or fast response justice teams, something like that, which to me just sounded like neighborhood watch vigilantes. It was very fancy language for telling us that neighborhoods and communities will be patrolled by independent vigilante groups, which didn't sound healthy at all. Let's see. Rick Ashbringer, Scribelight. Yuri Bezmenov had other names for it. I don't know who that is because I'm not a historian. Mark Ponicky, these people should have to watch Mad Max because it's what they want, essentially, a post-apocalyptic wasteland of freedom. Hey, man, have you ever seen Wasteland Weekends? Or Wasteland Weekend, I guess, that they do every year. I don't know if they did it this year because of the pandemic, but that place is pretty cool. You know, if I was more of an outdoorsy type and I didn't mind like dust and grit in my eyes all the time, man, I'd love to dress up and go there and be a Mad Max vigilante in the wasteland for a weekend. That'd be cool. Ryan Scribelight, the stream was rigged from the start by the commies. Give them helicopter rides. I don't know what else to say about it. Janetti Hella, so far they haven't put forth anything new. They just state that black people get treated like shit, and when that isn't the case, when that isn't the case all the time. People get treated like shit all the time for being people. It's mostly class-based a lot of the time. There is a disparity in wealth, a disparity in, what do you want to say, in the nature of your quality of life. And it is far money based. I've said this many times on Lords of the Night. If a politician came to me and says, hey, I have a plan to make sure that no one will go bankrupt from being sick ever again. If that was their single issue thing, like I have a plan for healthcare to ensure that no one's going to go bankrupt and lose their life savings simply on the basis of them gaining a disease that they obviously didn't ask for and didn't, etc. If someone came to me with that idea, I'd be like, great, I will give you a shot. I mean, it sounds pie in the sky, but man alive, I have seen too many people in my life and elsewise just devastated by things they have no control over. I hate that. I hate that disparity. And yet someone who is rich obviously has the ability to avoid that fate, conceivably. I don't like that. That I don't like. So that's why Medicare for all, that kind of stuff it's a very attractive notion. But I always come back to, how's it going to be paid for? How's it going to work? And I realize that's kind of not here or there with all this stuff, but they're talking about Medicare for all. It's like, that's one of those things that sounds very attractive. Sounds like a really good idea. Can you make it work? Because certainly the system that we've got doesn't help everybody the way that it should. You should, as a human being, you shouldn't have to die because you're poor or die because you can't afford whatever. In a society, in this day and age and so on, your lifespan should not come down to the length of your pocketbook. You know what I mean? So that's one thing. If that's a communistic idea, socialist idea, well, it's one of the ones that I am kind of hopeful for at some point in the future. But in my lifetime, probably not. Rick Ashbringer, Yuri was a KGB defector who did an interview in the 80s that discussed demoralization, destabilization, and normalization. Oh, yeah, I've seen that posted on YouTube several times. He's like a kind of bald guy with glasses. Yeah, I've seen that. I've seen that around. I haven't watched the whole thing before, but Havoc Vladimir Stolanov. I always love watching people bitch and complain about how bad the U.S. is from their nice homes in front of their fancy computers while making a decent living doing minimal amounts of work writing fluff. Speaking of which, who are our speakers in this? Our authors, sorry. They said at the bottom here. Dan Berger teaches at the University of Washington, Bothell, coordinates the Washington Prison History Project, wrote Captive Nation, Black Prison Organizing in the Civil Rights Era, and co-edited Remaking Radicalism, a grassroots documentary reader of the United States, 1973 to 2001. Aha. And David Stein is a UC President's postdoctoral fellow in the Department of African American Studies at University of California, Los Angeles. His book, Fearing Inflation, Inflating Fears, The Civil Rights Struggle for Full Employment and the Rise of the Carceral State, 1929 to 1986, is forthcoming from the University of North Carolina Press. Carceral is a word I've only started learning as a result of these articles. I cannot, to the best of my recollection, I had never, ever seen the word carceral used in any context until these articles. So if there's a silver lining to all of this, as thin a silver lining as it is, I'm expanding my vocabulary a little bit at a time. But with that, everyone, I'm going to wrap this up. Thank you so much for coming out to listen to this little reading of another essay on abolition. I'll be doing another one in the near future just to expand my knowledge because that's what I do. I may also do another stream later today if I feel like it. Not quite sure on what yet. It won't be a TEDx. Might be something else. But regardless, guys, thank you so much for coming out. Thank you so much for your participation. Everyone who donated, thank you so much for your generosity. It'll all go towards horrible things I'll put into my body like goldfish crackers and Jack Daniels to help insulate my brain from the next TEDx. I hope everyone has a good rest of your Sunday. I hope you're all safe and well. If you're not well, please get well soon. And I'll see you on the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.